We've seen the news stories. We saw turned on the news the other day, and they were showing the funeral procession. It was a private ceremony they had. We've heard all about her acting prowess, and we've heard about how after her acting career kind of came to a close, that she was very involved in fighting AIDS, and all week we heard about what a wonderful human being she was. Now, understand, I'm not here to step on anyone's grave and to stomp on anyone's reputation. Don't misunderstand what I'm about to say. This woman was married 8 times to 7 different men. And we celebrate her for being a great, wonderful humanitarian. This woman at the well, married 5 times, living with a man who wasn't her husband. Jesus pointed out the man who she was living with, she had not taken any vows with. This was not. Let me put this as bluntly as I can. This was not the virtuous woman the Proverbs tells us about. And yet here sat Jesus talking to her. And there she stood exposed. This was a cultural outcast. This was a social outcast. This was a spiritual outcast. This was a sinner standing in front of Christ in all of her glory, listening to Jesus talk about relationship, realizing her own sinfulness. So she tried to change the subject. Now, here's what I really love about this. Jesus won't let her. Jesus won't let her change the subject. She asks this question, this deep theological question about worship, and Jesus brings it right back. That's why he brings the conversation back to the fact that the one the Father is out looking for are those who will worship him in spirit and truth. In other words, the Father is out looking for those who will come before him honestly and authentically, warts and all. As we continue on this journey from ashes to fire, and as we are asking God to stir into blaze those embers that are still in existence, and as we ask him to take us in our own lives from a place of brokenness to a place of empowerment, as we make this stop this morning with Jesus at the well and we sit with him, there's 2 things I think we need to take away from this. And the first lesson we learn from Jesus himself, and it's how Jesus is the one who initiated the conversation with this Samaritan woman, with this cultural and social and spiritual outcast. And what we learn is simply this: there is not one of us that is outside of the scope of God's grace and God's invitation to experience his forgiveness and his intimate presence. Not one of us. No matter what we've done, no matter where we've been, no matter what our background may be, no matter what our heritage may be, God loves each and every one of us. And God is intent, as is seen through Jesus' life, death, and his resurrection, on inviting us and drawing us into that relationship. I got to tell you, there's times in my life I feel kind of like the Samaritan woman. I'm embarrassed, or I'm afraid, wondering, could Jesus really be talking to me? Looking around, maybe we look around to see if maybe there's somebody who snuck up behind us. Let me assure you, Jesus this morning is talking to each and every one of us as he draws us into that relationship. And not just to experience his forgiveness for the first time, but even to those of us who perhaps have been Christians for years. God still talks to us through Christ today, inviting us to experience his presence more powerfully and more intimately than ever before. Hear me, Jesus is the one who initiates the conversation. There is not a thing that you've done. There is not a place that you've been that is outside the scope of God's invitation to come into personal relationship with him or to come into a deeper relationship with him. Second lesson we learn, though, comes from the woman. simply this. If we are going to experience this living water, if we're going to experience the intimacy into which Christ is inviting us, we need to be honest with ourselves, and we need to be, more importantly, honest with God about who we really are. See, the woman said to Jesus, "You're not supposed to be talking to me because I'm a Samaritan woman." And when Jesus confronted her with her living situation, when Jesus confronted her with her sinfulness, she didn't deny it. She said, "Oh, you got me mixed up with somebody else. That's not me. That's my sister. That's my twin sister. She looks just no." She didn't say that. You know what she said? She said, "You're a prophet." She basically said, "How did you know that? Unless you're from God." She might have tried to change the conversation for a second. She agreed with Jesus about her condition. And as she did, she experienced God's grace. She experienced the intimacy, that living water that Jesus was offering. Here's our problem. We've gotten real good at putting on our Sunday best. And I don't mean our suits and ties and our Easter dresses. I'm talking about the facades we put up. That I'm super spiritual. We wear our pious pout. We don't come into worship with a smile on our face because we're meeting with God. We kind of put on that pout like we just sucked on a whole bunch of lemons. I still don't understand how that came about. We put on that face and we use the right language and we try to fool everyone. We even try to fool ourselves about who we really are, and all in an attempt to try to fool God about who I am. Well, God, I don't have any issues here. I don't have any skeletons in my closet, God. And you know what we're really good at? If God begins to pinpoint something in our own lives, something that He wants to clean up in our own selves, that He needs to take care of in our own hearts, you know what we do? We change the subject. Oh, we don't talk about worship. We say, well, so-and-so down the street or so-and-so down the pew or, the pastor. We change the subject. We're real good at that. We're real good at that. Trying to act like we've got it all together spiritually. The problem is we might have gotten it all together. We forgot where we put it. We act as if there's nothing hidden in our spiritual closet. We tell God, God, I don't have a husband. And then He says, you're right. You've had 5. And the one you live with right now, you're not married to. See, if we're going to experience the intimacy of God's presence, we have to be honest before Him. If we're hiding something, we're foolish to think that somehow God isn't going to know. Let me just confess to you. And don't think, Michael, you can keep recording. This isn't going to be some great immorality. I was praying the other day. And just had a lot of stuff in my mind and a lot of stuff in my heart. And I got to tell you, I was trying to put a spiritual twist on it all. And it was as if God just slipped His arm around me and said, why are you trying to fool me? What are you thinking? Now, I understand God doesn't talk to you necessarily this way, but He said to me, come on, dummy. It's me you're talking to. Why are you trying to fool me? I know you. I created you. Why are you trying to fool me? And so finally I said, okay, God, here it is. Let me tell you how I feel. And I was ushered into another level of my experience with God that I had never known before. Because I just got honest with Him. And I just got real with Him. And I said, here's how I feel, God. Why was I trying to hide it? He knew already. It's kind of like when I walk in the door and Teresa looks at my face and she sees something's going on and she sees my mind's up. What are you thinking about? Nothing. No, Paul, really, what are you thinking about? Nothing. Now, I understand with my mind and the way my mind is, it's easy to think that there's nothing there. I understand that. But she looks in my eyes and she sees, oh, his mind's somewhere else. What are you thinking about? I got to get honest. We got to get honest before God. And as we do, as this woman did, she experienced God's grace. She experienced God's forgiveness. She experienced the intimacy of God when He confronted her and she said, you know what, you're right. If we are going to experience the intimacy of God's presence, we have to be honest before Him. If we are hiding something, we're foolish to think that God somehow isn't going to know. So here's what I think we need to ask ourselves this morning. What am I trying to hide? What is there in my life that I'm trying to cover up? It may not be some great sin, some great immorality. Maybe it's just that maybe I'm as intentional about being with Him as I need to be. What is it that I'm trying to cover up? What is there in my life keeping me from experiencing God's invitation to intimacy, all of its fullness? Do you know what the word confession means? We have an idea of what confession is. We go and we tell somebody all the stuff we've done. Really, what confession is an agreeing with God about who we are. Our condition, who we are, is that apart from God's grace, you and I are sinners. I know you don't want to hear that, but we are. Apart from His grace, we're sinners. The woman at the well agreed with Jesus that she was a sinner, and she agreed that she needed His intimate presence in His life, and she experienced that living water. The question I have to ask is, will you? Will I agree with Christ and accept His invitation? I want you to remember one thing, and that is this. Jesus is initiating the conversation. Jesus is initiating the conversation with me. No matter what we've done, no matter where we've been, Jesus invites you. Jesus invites me to experience His intimate presence. So as we continue on this journey this morning, we're gonna close singing that song that we sang right before the message, Send the Water. I want you to allow those questions to circulate through your mind and your heart. Is there anything I'm trying to hide? Is there anything that's keeping me from experiencing the living water? If there is, there's a place to pray. Let's stand together and let's sing, Send the Water.